I never thought the day my father died would also be the day I lost my home. My name is Claire Whitfield, 32 years old, and for 8 years, I have been the quiet shadow in my own family's mansion in Charleston, South Carolina. My father, Richard Whitfield, built Whitfield Textiles from nothing. When he passed, I thought grief would be the hardest part. I was wrong. My stepbrothers, Marcus and Dean, never looked at me as family. Not once. To them, I was the daughter from my father's first mistake, as Marcus liked to call my mother. The moment the funeral flowers wilted, they moved into my father's office, like vultures who had been waiting years for the feast. You do understand, Marcus said one morning, not even glancing up from the documents spread across my father's desk, that none of this is legally yours. I remember laughing, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Dean slid a folder toward me. Inside were termination papers from the company my own father founded. My name, listed as an employee to be released effective immediately. You can't do this, I whispered. We just did, Dean said, almost bored. That afternoon, security escorted me out of the building I had walked into every day since I was 24. My apartment, company-owned housing, was next. 2 men in gray uniforms stacked my belongings into cardboard boxes on the sidewalk, while neighbors watched through their blinds, pretending not to. Where am I supposed to go? I asked Marcus, my voice cracking. He didn't even turn around. Not our problem anymore. That night, I sat on a bench outside Battery Park with 2 suitcases and $43 in my checking account. Rain had started falling soft and cold, soaking through my coat. I kept replaying my father's voice in my head, the last thing he told me, before the hospital machines went silent. Claire, no matter what happens, you'll always have more than you think you do. At the time, I thought he meant memories, love, strength. I had no idea. He meant something else entirely, something buried in a lawyer's office 3 states, a way that my stepbrothers didn't even know existed. A black car pulled up beside the bench. The window rolled down. Miss Whitfield? The driver asked. I've been looking for you for 3 days. I froze. No one was supposed to know where I was. I clutched my suitcase tighter and stepped back from the car. I don't know you. The driver, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a neatly pressed suit, didn't move closer. He simply held up an envelope through the open window. My name is Harold Bennett. I was your father's attorney for 22 years. He asked me to find you if anything ever happened to him, and to make sure I found you before your stepbrothers did. My chest tightened. My father died 3 weeks ago. Where were you 3 weeks ago, Mr. Bennett? Following instructions, he said quietly. Your father was very specific about timing. He said, and I quote, wait until they think they've won. Then bring her to me. Rain dripped down my collar as I stared at him, trying to decide if this was a cruel trick orchestrated by Marcus, some final humiliation before he threw me out of the state entirely. I have nowhere to be, I finally said. So talk fast. He opened the back door instead. Not here, please. Every instinct told me to walk away. But something in his voice, steady, almost apologetic, made me climb inside. We drove in silence through streets I barely recognized until we reached a modest office building downtown, nothing like the glass tower where Whitfield Textiles now operated under my stepbrothers' names. Inside, Bennett unlocked a drawer and placed a thick folder in front of me. Your father didn't build Whitfield Textiles alone, Miss Whitfield. 15 years ago, he quietly restructured the ownership. 60% of the company was placed into a private trust. Not under his name. Under yours. I stared at the paper, certain I was misreading it. That's not possible. Marcus and Dean run the board. They control everything. They control the day-to-day operations, Bennett corrected. But operational control isn't ownership. Your father made sure of that. He never told them because he suspected. Exactly what they would do the moment he was gone. My hands were shaking now, not from the cold. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? Why let me lose everything first? Bennett's expression turned grave. Because your father believed people show their true nature only when they think no one is watching. He wanted you to see who they really were, without the trust protecting you. He wanted you to know the truth about your family before you inherited the truth about your company. He slid one final document across the table. My father's handwriting was scrawled across the top in blue ink, a note meant only for me. Asterisk, Claire, if you're reading this, it means they've already shown you who they are. Now it's time they learned who you really are. Sign nothing until you've read every page. And when you're ready, call the number on the last sheet. He's been waiting for this day longer than you know. Asterisk. I turned to the last page. There was a phone number. And beneath it, a name I hadn't seen in over a decade. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. Ethan Cole. My breath caught. Ethan wasn't a stranger. He was the boy who used to sit beside me on the porch of my father's summer house, the one who taught me to ride a bike when I was 9, the one who disappeared from our lives after his own father, my dad's closest business partner, died in a car accident that no one ever fully explained. I hadn't spoken to him in 14 years. Why him? I asked Bennett, my voice barely above a whisper. Your father trusted very few people completely, Bennett said, closing the folder. Ethan Cole was one of them. What happens next is between the two of you. I've done what I was asked to do. He handed me a phone, a new one, still in his box. Call him when you're ready. Not before. That night, I sat in a small motel room Bennett had arranged, staring at the number for nearly 3 hours before I finally pressed call. It rang twice. Claire, his voice hadn't changed, steady, warm but guarded, like he'd been expecting this call for years and dreading it at the same time. You knew, I said. Didn't you? About the trust. About all of it. A long pause. I knew your father protected you. I didn't know how much until his lawyer contacted me last week. Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? Why did I have to lose my job, my apartment? My voice cracked before I could finish. Because your father made me promise something, Ethan said quietly. He said if he died before Marcus and Dean revealed their true colors, I wasn't allowed to intervene. He needed you to see it with your own eyes. No doubt left. No excuses you could make for them later. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. So what happens now? Now, Ethan said, and for the first time I heard something sharpen in his voice, something almost protective. We take back what's yours. Legally, quietly, until the moment they can no longer pretend it isn't happening. They'll fight it, I said. Marcus doesn't lose. He's never lost anything in his life. He's never gone up against someone who owns 60% of everything he thinks he controls. Ethan said, There's something else you should know, Claire. Something your father asked me to build in secret over the last 3 years, in case this exact day ever came. What is it? A company, he said. One that quietly acquired debt your stepbrothers took out against Whitfield Textiles without board approval. Debt that's about to come due. And Claire, I'm not the only investor behind it. My heart pounded. Who else? Ethan's voice dropped low. Someone your stepbrothers fired 8 years ago, and swore would never come near this family again. Someone they think is still overseas, still broken, still harmless. He paused. Claire, your mother is alive. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like the weight of the words themselves had traveled through the line and settled into my palm. That's not possible, I finally managed. She died. When I was 19. There was a funeral, Ethan. I stood there. I threw dirt on the casket. There was a funeral, Ethan said carefully. There wasn't a body, Claire. Not one anyone let you see. My mind raced back to that day, the closed casket, the way Marcus and Dean's mother, my stepmother Vivian, had insisted on a private, rushed service before I even finished crying. At the time, I thought it was grief. Now every detail felt rearranged, like a photograph I'd been looking at upside down for 13 years. Why would they lie about something like that? My voice shook. Why would my own father let me believe she was dead? He didn't, Ethan said. Not at first. Your mother left the family when Vivian threatened to destroy her reputation, her career, everything, if she didn't disappear quietly. Your father didn't find out the truth until years later, that Vivian had staged the whole thing, paid off a hospital administrator, forged records. By the time he uncovered it, your mother had already built a new life overseas under a different name, terrified of what would happen to you if the truth ever came out. I sat down hard on the motel bed, the room spinning slightly. She's known this whole time? That I thought she was dead? She wanted to come back 100 times, Ethan said gently. Your father convinced her it wasn't safe, yet, not until he could guarantee Vivian's family couldn't touch either of you. He was building toward this moment for years, Claire. The trust, the debt acquisition, your mother's return. It was never random. It was a plan he never lived to finish. Tears blurred my vision, but for the first time since my father's funeral, they weren't only tears of grief. I want to see her, I whispered. She's already on a flight, Ethan said. She lands in Charleston tomorrow morning. I gripped the phone tighter. And Marcus? Dean? Vivian? Do they know any of this? Not yet, Ethan said, and I could hear the faintest edge of satisfaction in his voice. Tomorrow, they're hosting an investor gala to celebrate record growth under their leadership. Cameras, press, half the city's business elite. So that's where we tell them everything, Ethan said. In front of every person whose respect they've spent the last 3 weeks stealing from you. My hands stopped shaking. Send me the address, I said. I'll be there. The gala was everything I expected. Chandeliers dripping gold light over a ballroom full of people who used to know my name and now looked through me like I was staff who'd wandered in from the kitchen. I stood near the entrance in a navy dress Ethan had sent to my motel that morning, my mother's flight having landed only hours before. She was here somewhere, waiting in a private room upstairs with Bennett, ready but not yet revealed. Ethan stood beside me, his hand resting lightly at my back, a quiet anchor in a room full of people who wanted me gone. Claire? A voice I hadn't heard in years turned my blood cold. Vivian, my stepmother, radiant in emerald silk, her smile sharpening the moment she recognized me. I didn't think you'd have the audacity to show your face here. Security. That won't be necessary, Ethan said calmly, stepping forward. Ms. Whitfield is a majority shareholder of Whitfield Textiles. She's welcome anywhere this company hosts an event. Marcus appeared beside his mother, champagne glass in hand, his laugh loud enough to draw a nearby guest's attention. Majority shareholder? That's a bold fantasy, even for you, Claire. It's not a fantasy, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's public record, as of this afternoon. Dean's smile faltered first. Something in my calm unsettled him more than anger ever could have. You're bluffing, Marcus said, but his eyes flicked toward Vivian, searching for reassurance she didn't have. I nodded toward the stage, where the company's PR director had just stepped up to the microphone to begin the evening's remarks, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Ask him yourself. He received the shareholder disclosure an hour ago. Legal required it before tonight's presentation. The room's low hum of conversation began shifting into something sharper, more attentive, as nearby guests picked up on the tension radiating from our corner. This is a mistake, Vivian hissed, stepping closer, her voice dropping. Whatever you think you've found, whatever games your father's lawyer is playing, you will regret walking in here tonight. Funny, I said. That's almost exactly what you told my mother 13 years ago. Vivian went completely still. What did you just say? Marcus asked slowly. Before I could answer, the ballroom doors opened behind us. Every head turned. Gasps rippled outward from the entrance like a stone dropped into still water. Vivian's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Standing in the doorway, dressed simply, her eyes locked directly on Vivian with 13 years of buried fury finally surfacing, was my mother. The ballroom fell into a silence so complete, I could hear the ice melting in someone's abandoned drink. That's not possible, Vivian whispered, backing into Marcus, her composure cracking for the first time all evening. You're dead. I made sure. You made sure of a lot of things, my mother said, her voice cutting across the room as she walked forward, every step deliberate. A forged death certificate. A paid-off administrator at Roper Hospital. A closed casket funeral you rushed through before anyone could ask questions. Gasps spread through the crowd. Phones quietly rose, recording though no one dared speak. Eleanor. Vivian's voice had lost all its silk. This is not the place. This is exactly the place, my mother said. You spent 13 years making sure I'd never have one. I think I'm owed this room for 5 minutes. Marcus stepped forward, trying to reclaim control the only way he knew how, volume. This is absurd. Security removed these people immediately, Before you what, Marcus? Ethan's voice was calm, almost bored, as he pulled a folder from his jacket. Fire someone else who actually owns the company you're standing in. Because that's the other thing we haven't told you yet. He handed the folder to the stunned PR director still frozen at the microphone. Page 4. The debt Whitfield Textiles took on 18 months ago against board policy, without shareholder approval, to fund the expansion you both bragged about tonight. That debt was quietly purchased 3 weeks ago. By who? Dean's voice cracked, the first real fear I'd heard from him in years. By a holding company, Ethan said, owned jointly by myself, Eleanor Whitfield and Claire Whitfield. The room erupted into hushed, urgent whispers. Investors who had been laughing with Marcus 20 minutes earlier were now stepping subtly away from him, phones still raised. You have no legal standing, Vivian said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. None of this will hold up. It already has, Bennett said, appearing calmly from the side entrance, a fresh set of documents in hand. Filed with the state this morning, Miss Whitfield now controls 60% equity. And as of 5 minutes ago, majority debt holder rights as well. Marcus's face drained of color. That means, I said, finally stepping forward, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been in 3 weeks. You don't get to fire me tomorrow, Marcus. I get to decide if you still have a job. Vivian opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in 13 years, my mother reached over and took my hand. Now, she said quietly, looking directly at Vivian, let's talk about everything else you thought you buried. Vivian's eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Every guest, every reporter, every camera was fixed on her now. You don't understand what you're doing, she said, her voice low, meant only for my mother and me, though it carried further than she wanted. I protected this family. I protected the company. You protected yourself, my mother said. There's a difference, Vivian, though I don't expect you to see it. Bennett cleared his throat, stepping closer with another document in hand. There's more. When we filed for majority ownership this morning, it triggered a mandatory financial audit, standard procedure for any leadership transition of this size. The preliminary results came in an hour ago. Marcus's jaw tightened. What results? 3 years of misappropriated funds, Bennett said plainly, routed through shell vendors, registered to addresses, connected to Vivian Whitfield and Dean Whitfield. Approximately $4.2 million. The room gasped audibly this time. Even the investors who had stayed loyal to Marcus out of habit began stepping further away, as though proximity itself might be contagious. That's a lie, Dean said, but his voice had lost all its earlier bravado. Fabricated? All of it. It's in your own accounting software, Dean, Ethan said quietly. Under your own login credentials. We didn't fabricate anything. We just finally had the access to look. Vivian's composure, the last thread of it, finally snapped. Everything I did to survive. Your father was going to leave everything to Eleanor and that ungrateful girl the moment he found out I'd lied about the money. I had no choice. You had a choice, I said. You chose cruelty when kindness cost you nothing. You chose to sell me out for a company you didn't even legally control. That wasn't survival, Vivian. That was greed wearing survival's clothes. Security, actual hotel security this time, quietly approached at Bennett's earlier signal, waiting only for my word. Vivian looked at me, something desperate flickering behind her eyes. Claire, please. We're still family. Whatever happened, we can fix this quietly, before it destroys everything. I almost laughed. 3 weeks ago, those words might have broken me. Tonight this sounded hollow, rehearsed, exactly like every apology she'd never actually meant. You stopped being my family the day you handed me termination papers instead of condolences, I said. Take them. I nodded once towards security. As they escorted Vivian, Marcus, and Dean out through a side door, away from cameras, away from the empire they spent 3 weeks pretending was theirs, my mother squeezed my hand. Your father will be proud of you tonight, she whispered. I looked around the ballroom, at the company I never expected to inherit, at the mother I never expected to see again. He's not finished yet, I said quietly. Neither am I. 6 months later, I stood in my father's old office, my office now, watching the sun rise over Charleston Harbor through the same window he used to stand at every morning. The board had voted unanimously to reinstate me as CEO of Whitfield Textiles. Marcus and Dean's shares, diluted by the debt restructuring and stripped further by the embezzlement settlement, were nearly worthless. Both men had quietly relocated out of state, their names no longer welcome in any boardroom that mattered in this city. Vivian faced fraud charges that would take years to resolve, her emerald silk dresses replaced by the gray reality of what she'd actually built her life on. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't need to. Watching the truth simply exist in daylight was satisfaction enough. My mother moved into the guest house on the property my father had left in trust, not as an employee, not as staff, but as family finally, after 13 stolen years. Some mornings I'd find her in the garden he used to tend, and I understood, in a way words never could explain, that some kinds of justice aren't loud. They're quiet mornings you were never supposed to get to have. Ethan stayed too, though his title changed from family friend to something neither of us had quite named yet, not out loud. He still showed up every evening around 6, the same way he had for 6 months straight, bringing coffee I never asked for and staying long after the sun went down. I found myself, more often than not, hoping he would. On my father's desk, I kept the note Bennett had given me that rainy night on the bench, tucked inside a frame beside his photograph. Asterisk, you'll always have more than you think you do. Asterisk, he was right. Not just about the 60%, the trust, the empire hidden in plain sight. He meant this. My mother's hand in mine again. Ethan's steady presence in a doorway. A company rebuilt on honesty instead of fear. A family finally made of people who chose to stay, not because a will demanded it, but because they wanted to. Sometimes I still think about that night on the bench, $43 in my account, rain soaking through my coat, believing I had lost everything. I hadn't lost everything. I had simply been waiting to find out what and who was real. And in the end, that was worth more than any empire ever could be, asterisk, asterisk, the end, asterisk, asterisk.